Hey there, and welcome to my channel. I'm Ashley Willingham, a sinner saved by grace, and an author of clean Christian fantasy romance books filled with adult characters, action, adventure, on-page prayer, and God's truths. You're listening to the free serialized audiobook for Ink and Ivy, my cozy Christian fantasy romance, Book One in the Gracehaven series. Don't forget to like and subscribe. God bless and enjoy.
Chapter 15. Silence descended upon their corner of the table. For a long, suspended heartbeat, Mr. Vale merely stared at her. The rigid composure of his aristocratic mask finally slipped, revealing a muscle feathering along his jawline. He opened his mouth to reply, only to promptly snap it shut again. Ivy's heart hammered against her ribs as she waited for him to say something. Anything. Perhaps she had pushed him entirely too far this time by lobbing the first words he had ever spoken to her back in his face. And in front of an audience, no less. Slowly, he moved, leaning back in his chair, yielding the space. For the briefest moment, she caught a glimpse of some strange heat sparking in the depths of his eyes. Something dangerously close to respect, or perhaps genuine amusement. "Papa?" Elodie's small, hesitant voice broke the heavy tension stretching between them. "Does this mean I might go?" At last, Mr. Vale pried his gaze from hers and turned to face his daughter. The moment he did, she was horrified to find that her hands were trembling in her lap. She buried them within the folds of her napkin, desperate to hide them from the far too observant man sitting right beside her.
"Very well,"
he quietly informed Elodie, his features a mask of cold marble once more.
"We shall both attend the engagement party."
Elodie's eyes flew wide. "Oh, thank you, Papa. Thank you, and thank you, Miss Ivy." She beamed up at Grandma Evelyn. "Did you hear that? We are going to the ball." "I heard, Miss Elodie," the older woman chuckled. Ivy offered the girl a weak smile, truly glad to see her excitement rekindled. Yet her victory against Mr. Vale felt less like a triumph and more like she had just stepped off the edge of a very high cliff. She had won the argument, to be sure. Elodie would get her country dance. But as she sat there, trying to slow the racing of her heart, she couldn't shake the terrifying feeling that she might have just dared Mr. Vale to claim a dance with her at the very ball in question. Clearing her throat, Grandma Evelyn turned a fresh smile upon the elven man in question as she smoothly changed the subject. "And when is your shop set to be open to the public, Mr. Vale? I saw the new sign painted across the front windows. What a charming name."
"Thank you,"
he murmured, his tone quite dry.
"Yes. My ridiculous idea for a shop will be enjoying its grand opening tomorrow afternoon."
Ivy winced as he parroted her own words right back at her. Clearly, two could play at that game. Elodie's brow furrowed with her confusion. "But your shop isn't ridiculous, Papa." Crumpling her napkin even further within her grip, Ivy stammered in an attempt to direct the conversation back toward the shop opening. "No doubt the town will be quite pleased to have no shortage of fancy envelopes." Without missing a beat, Mr. Vale smoothly fired back.
"Let us not forget the fancy paper to go inside the fancy envelopes, Miss Fairwood."
She clamped her mouth shut, suddenly fighting to hide her confused smile. Was he abusing her, or himself? She no longer knew. From across the table, Grandma Evelyn's gaze darted between the two of them, her eyes positively gleaming with suppressed amusement. "I have no doubt it will be a lovely grand opening," she smoothly intervened. "I'll be sure to stop by myself." Clapping her hands together with a bright, overly innocent cheer, Grandma Evelyn then announced, "Well, if everyone is finished with their dinner, Elodie, my dear, would you be so kind as to help me bring out the dessert? It will give Miss Ivy and your papa a moment to discuss a few things." "Oh, yes, please," Elodie happily agreed, hopping down from her chair. The moment the parlour door clicked shut behind them, the atmosphere in the room shifted, growing thick with words left unsaid. This was it. No doubt this was the moment Grandma Evelyn wished for her to take to offer her apology. Ivy shifted in her chair and swallowed hard against the thick knot forming in her throat. She didn't want to confess that she had wronged this man. She didn't want to beg his forgiveness. James 4:17, another of the verses she had memorized as a child, bubbled to the forefront of her thoughts. If anyone, then, knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. This was the good she ought to do. She had to do it. Gathering her courage, she forced herself to look at him once more, only to find Mr. Vale already watching her out of the corner of his eye, his expression completely guarded. "I fear I owe you an apology, Mr. Vale," she blurted out before she could lose her nerve, her fingers twisting her napkin yet more. "For gossiping about you at the crochet club. Though I'm not sure if you heard me. Still, whether you heard me or not, it was wrong of me, and I wanted you to know how terribly sorry I am." For several agonizing moments the man sat there, utterly silent. But after that pause, he murmured, his dark baritone as smooth as glass.
How refreshing it is to find myself within a community where I can rest assured that my neighbors will pray to the Lord on my behalf, asking him to send me something to fix my dreadful disposition.
Ivy's stomach plummeted straight to the floor. He had heard her. He had heard every single awful, uncharitable word. I'm truly sorry," she tried to force out, desperate to explain herself, as if she had any excuse at all for her behaviour. But he cut her off with a sharp, minute shake of his head.
I was unkind to you first, Miss Fairwood,
he quietly pointed out.
One can hardly blame you for being equally unkind to me in return.
He paused. His eyes drifted upward, lingering for a fraction of a second on the silk flowers woven throughout her hair. She stiffened, waiting for his words to become barbed again, for him to find some way to insult her yet more. But when his gaze dropped back down to meet hers, the rigid line of his jaw softened by a barely perceptible degree.
Perhaps you might forgive me, Miss Fairwood, for the way I treated you at our first meeting, as I have already forgiven you for your words against me.
Forgiveness. Ivy's lips parted faintly in surprise. She had braced herself for the worst tonight, for a harsh reprimand, for him to snub her, or perhaps even to mock her. Instead, he wished for her to forgive him. The parlour door swung open, heralding Grandma Evelyn and Elodie's return. But Ivy managed to squeeze out a breathless, "Yes, of course," before the two rejoined the table, bringing with them a magnificent fruit tart, a marvel of shimmering, honey-glazed strawberries and blueberries arranged in colourful spirals atop a bed of vanilla cream. As Grandma Evelyn sliced the dessert and passed the porcelain plates around the table, Elodie leaned over her portion and looked eagerly up at Ivy. "Is it true what Grandma Evelyn says, Miss Ivy?" the little girl asked. "That you're a great herbalist who always helps people feel better when they're ill?" Ivy blinked a few times, the abrupt change in conversation nearly giving her whiplash. But soon, as Elodie's words properly seeped in, a fond warmth flared in her chest. She glanced across the table at Grandma Evelyn, who offered her a smile and a slice of fruit tart. "Well, I wouldn't say I'm a great herbalist," she gently deflected. "But yes, I am Gracehaven's resident herbalist. I brew tinctures and salves for the community, and sometimes I forage for specific herbs when people need them." She chanced a quick, tentative glance at Mr. Vale. Yet again, the man seemed wholly devoted to the task of ignoring her existence, as if nothing at all had passed between them tonight, not their argument, not their truce. She was no closer to understanding him than when the evening began. "In fact," Ivy continued, turning her attention back to Elodie, "tomorrow morning I will be going out into the forest to collect the very herbs your father needs so that he can mix the paint for Miss Daphne's wedding invitations." Elodie gasped, her eyes lighting up. "Oh, I have never been within a forest before. Can I come too?"
Absolutely not,
Mr. Vale coolly interjected, shutting the idea down with absolute immediate authority as he prodded his slice of tart with his fork.
You have school tomorrow morning.
Elodie sighed and slumped over her plate, frowning down at her dessert. "Yes, Papa." The sight made Ivy's heart twinge. Eager to lure another smile to the sweet girl's face, she leaned forward and promised, "But I would absolutely love for you to accompany me another time, Miss Elodie. I can show you all my favourite places in the forest and which herbs are safe and which are not. Perhaps we might go this next weekend? Or the weekend after that?" She hazarded a quick glance toward Mr. Vale, quickly tacking on, "Assuming your father approves, of course." Elodie's head popped back up, her gaze turning pleading. "Oh, please, Papa!" Mr. Vale froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. Another of those unreadable expressions crossed his sharp features as he first stared at his daughter before flicking a sidelong glance back toward her. His eyes searched hers, clearly hunting for something. For the briefest moment, his jaw grew exceptionally tight. But at last he softly conceded,
Perhaps.
Chapter 16. "Ivy, Ivy, wake up!" That frantic whisper dragged Ivy upward through the heavy layers of sleep and back into the waking world. Blearily opening her eyes, she blinked against the gloom of her bedroom, only to find her window still pitch black. Not even the faintest hint of dawn touched the glass through the lace curtains. Exhaustion clung to her limbs like damp wool. She scrubbed her hands over her eyes and let out a long yawn. "What time is it?" "It's 5:30, Marigold cheerfully announced from the side of the bed. Ivy groaned. Rolling over, she yanked her patchwork quilt entirely over her head. "Unless the honey bloom is on fire, there is no reason to wake me up this early," she mumbled into her pillow, desperately trying to recapture the swiftly fading vestiges of her dream. She had been dancing with someone, a shadowy figure guiding her expertly across a crowded ballroom floor. Perhaps the man she thought was surely Fern. Marigold chuckled softly, clearly unbothered by her snappish tone. There are plenty of reasons to wake up at such a reasonable hour. Some of us have work to do, you know. The mattress dipped as the Sun-Fae sat on the edge of her bed. "But I just thought you'd like to know you already have a new package from Fern." It took a few long seconds for Marigold's words to properly penetrate her sleep-muddled mind. "A package?" "Fern." Ivy gasped and shoved herself upright, her hand fumbling for the small brass knob on her bedside oil lamp. A warm, flickering amber light soon flooded the room. There, resting in Marigold's lap, was another small box wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with a green ribbon, simply addressed to Miss Ivy. All remnants of her exhaustion instantly vanished. Eagerly snatching the box from her best friend's hands, she stared down at the neat, looping script. "But Felix never delivers the post at this hour." "No, indeed," Marigold agreed, her gossamer wings giving an excited flutter behind her. "I suppose our mysterious Fern simply delivered it himself. I found it outside when I went to water the flowers out front." Ivy let loose with a groan. Her admirer was an early riser too. How unfortunate that he too thinks this is a reasonable hour to be awake, she playfully lamented. And yet, despite the fact that it was before dawn and she should still be sleeping, Ivy couldn't help the silly smile that claimed her lips as she tugged the ribbon loose and peeled back the brown paper to reveal another envelope sealed with a dollop of red wax, waiting for her atop another nondescript cardboard box. Her fingers twitched toward the letter, desperate to open it first, to read his words. But her curiosity got the better of her. Setting it aside for now, she pulled the lid free from the box and peeked inside. Resting there was a delicate, beautifully crafted pastry dusted with powdered sugar. Warm notes of butter and the rich scent of dark chocolate unfurled from the decadent treat, swiftly perfuming her bedroom. Chocolate. Ivy's breath hitched. Instantly, her mind reeled backward toward Mr. Vale, the memory of her colliding with his solid, unyielding form, the sense of ink and dark chocolate wrapping around her. She swiftly shoved the thought away. No, absolutely not. She would not let that infuriatingly mercurial man intrude upon her time with Fern. "Oh, that smells divine," Marigold sighed, her tone wistful. "But what does the letter say? Please tell me he reveals his identity in this one. I am dying to know." Plucking up the letter again, Ivy cracked the seal and eagerly unfolded the heavy parchment.
Dear Miss Ivy, please forgive my terrible eagerness in writing back to you so swiftly. I received your letter last evening, and I must confess that I found myself entirely unable to sleep. So overjoyed was I to discover that you had accepted my invitation. Finding myself awake at such an hour, I turned to the kitchen. Baking, though perhaps not a traditionally masculine pastime, has always brought me a certain measure of quiet comfort when my mind is restless. Yes, I did bake that cake for you myself. How happy I am to hear that it was to your liking. And though I am quite certain that such treats are hardly a novelty for you, given that you reside above the bakery, I feel compelled to share them with you all the same, even more so now that you have encouraged me with your kind praise. As I sit by the hearth, now waiting for the sun to rise, I am reading a passage from the Bible for my daily devotional, and I must confess that the words instantly brought you to my mind. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. I dare say that my life has recently taken a surprising turn. Several surprising turns, if I am being perfectly honest. But those words always give me profound hope for the future. They remind me that the Lord always has something better in store for us, even when our path bends in ways we did not anticipate. As my path is bending now, I gather from your previous letter that your own life has not quite followed along with your designs of late. But I pray you will take comfort in the knowledge that he surely has something better in store for you as well. I shall stop writing here, lest I ramble aimlessly for hours more and miss my opportunity to deliver this to you before you wake. But I hope you know, Miss Ivy, though surely I will sound rather foolish indeed to admit to such a thing so soon in our acquaintance, that I will be tracking the moments until I hear from you again. What manner of thoughts occupy your mind? I long to know them. Any thoughts at all? And now it is I begging you not to keep me in suspense, though I am selfishly endeavoring to keep my true identity in the dark for a time longer, for you are quite right. Fern is a mere pseudonym. Respectfully, your admirer, Fern.
Her heart fluttered, fighting to wing straight from her chest as she stared at his latest sign-off. Your admirer. Fern did admire her. Perhaps he might even be intending to court her. "Oh," Ivy whispered, falling back against her pillows, the letter pressed against her chest. Here was a man who started his mornings with the Lord, studying his Bible, who baked just for her, who thought about her while doing his daily devotional. He longed to know her thoughts. He was tracking the moments until he heard from her again. He was wonderful. He was perfect. He could not be real. Was she still dreaming? Surely she was still dreaming. Marigold patiently waited where she still sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes wide. "Well, what did he say?" "The most exquisite things, Marie," she exhaled. Lifting the letter, she eagerly read it again, letting the beautiful vulnerability of his words wash over her. "He writes to beg my forgiveness for sending me a reply so soon, but he could not sleep for excitement that I accepted his invitation." Marigold gasped, clasping her hands over her heart. "Oh, how romantic!" "And he baked me this pastry himself," she breathlessly explained. "He is a baker." "A most noble profession," her best friend happily declared. "Perhaps he works at Angel Cakes, then." Pushing herself back to a sitting position, Ivy gazed down at the perfect little pastry sitting in its box. It certainly looked professional. He might... She frowned, suddenly uncertain. But what man would journey all the way from Lindenvale so early just to deliver a letter and a gift? She lifted her eyes back to Marigold's to find the Sunfay's gaze brimming with bright, sudden possibility. "I dare say you're worth the effort, Ivy." Chapter 17. The very idea was enough to make her heart leap all over again. That a man who so clearly loved God, a man who could not wait to write to her, who turned to baking in the middle of the night just to bring himself comfort, was going to such efforts on her behalf. But no sooner had her heart begun to race than a seed of doubt planted itself there, making her chest constrict with a sudden, nagging worry. Why would this man pine for her? She was no one special. She had no great fortune or any grand accomplishments to recommend her. And yet Fern wrote to her like a gentleman, at danger of becoming truly smitten. Another frown tugged at her lips, her heart growing heavy. It was all simply too perfect. Things this wondrous did not happen to her. Not now. Not ever. There was a reason she had never been swarmed by suitors like dear Daphne. What did she possibly have to offer a gentleman? She possessed no property, no dowry, no great standing in society. On paper she did not truly even exist. Ivy Flores had disappeared long ago, simply so that Ivy Fairwood could stay with her friends in Gracehaven, safe from the sanctuary edict. She could not even afford a modest roof over her own head. She was entirely reliant upon Marigold's boundless generosity, just to keep herself from being a further burden on Grandma Evelyn at the inn. A familiar, bitter ache flared in her chest, sharp and stinging. She had nothing to her name but a leather satchel of herbs and a meagre year's worth of savings. Why would such a seemingly wonderful man want her? "What's wrong?" Mary softly pressed. "It just feels too good to be true," she exhaled, her attention dropping toward this latest letter. "Why would a man go to such effort for me?" A breathless laugh escaping from her, a vaguely bitter sound. "If I were Daphne, I would understand. Daphne is a Halloway, but I'm just—" Reaching over, her best friend gently rested her hands on top of hers. "You're just Ivy, kind and clever, a talented herbalist, and an even better friend. Any man would be so very lucky to have you." The threat of tears shimmered in Marigold's gaze when she added, "I know you don't want to live here with me as a spinster forever, just as I know you were so set on the corner shop being your new home. But what if God closed that door simply so he could open another? One that leads to something so much better." Something better. Ivy twisted her lips. Did Mary truly believe Fern was a part of the path God was laying out for her? It was a lovely thought. A new life filled with happiness and belonging, alongside a man who could not sleep for thinking about her. A thought a part of her so wanted to be real. Ivy sighed, relaxing into the natural warmth emanating from Mary's skin, despite her own lingering doubts. What if her friend was right? What if she was wrong? "I just don't want to make a fool of myself," Ivy confessed. "I just don't." She soon trailed off, not sure how to put the fear now gnawing at her heart into words. "You don't want to be hurt," Marigold softly finished for her, a knowing, gentle smile curving her lips. "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion." It was the very verse from 2 Corinthians that Grandma Evelyn had always been so terribly fond of reciting whenever they came to her with their teenage troubles. Recognizing it at once, Ivy's tension eased. Crinkling her nose with fond amusement, she finished the verse herself. "And the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles." Letting Fern's letter rest atop her lap, she moved to clasp Mary's hands properly at last. "Are you telling me to take it to the Lord?" Marigold nodded, her smile turning sheepish. "Though I feel like a hypocrite for doing so, for the Lord knows there have been so many moments in my life when I have struggled alone instead of letting him comfort me. Oh!" She glanced toward the clock hanging on the wall. "The time." Ivy followed her gaze toward the clock. It was almost 6 a.m. "I need to get back downstairs or we'll be late opening," Mary fretted, imparting one last comforting squeeze before pulling away and hurrying toward the door. "But tell me everything," she added over her shoulder. "I want to know what you end up writing to him in return." "I will," she called back, her chest warming with a fierce affection for her best friend. She was so lucky to have her. Blessed, she reminded herself as her bedroom door clicked shut behind Mary. Luck had nothing to do with it. Clearly, God had brought the two of them together in friendship for a reason. But without Mary's innate sun-fey warmth to keep the chill of the pre-dawn air at bay, it finally seeped through Ivy's nightgown. Shivering, she snatched up her cashmere shawl from the back of her desk chair and wrapped the soft fabric tightly around her shoulders. Bowing her head and closing her eyes, she prayed silently. It felt terribly strange to bring such fragile hopes before the Lord, praying over Fern, when she had been neglecting her own relationship with him. But she needed the Lord's comfort now. Lord, please, I need your guidance now. Help me with this. If this is your will for me, then I will race toward it gladly. But if this man, if this growing affection blooming in my heart, is not what you want for my life, then please let me know. She blinked her eyes back open and glanced slowly around her room at her familiar furnishings softly illuminated by the amber glow of her oil lamp. She didn't know what she was looking for. A sign. Something to remind her of the exact Bible verse she needed now. All that she found, though, was the box holding Fern's latest pastry. Her stomach rumbled the longer she looked at it. Reaching into the box, Ivy plucked up the delicate treat. A fine dusting of powdered sugar immediately coated the tips of her fingers. The rich, intoxicating scents of dark chocolate and warm butter swirled through the cool morning air, making her mouth water. She brought it to her lips and took a generous bite. The pastry melted in her mouth, a symphony of impossibly light, buttery, flaky layers giving way to a decadent, molten center. Pure, bittersweet chocolate flooded her tongue, its richness perfectly balanced by the dissolving sweetness of the powdered sugar. It was the most perfect bite of dessert she had ever tasted. It was, and she would carry this treasonous secret to her grave, never breathing a single word of it to her best friend. Somehow even better than the chocolate confections baked downstairs at the Honey Bloom. As she chewed, luxuriating in the masterfully baked decadence, a familiar string of words drifted through the stillness of her mind. The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are trustworthy. Proverbs 12:22. She froze mid-chew. Lowering the half-eaten pastry back into its box, her gaze locked upon Fern's letter, still resting patiently atop her lap. Perhaps that was the answer. She simply needed to be honest with him. Completely and utterly trustworthy. If she was ever going to step through this newly opened door, if that's truly what it was, she had to be just as brave, just as unguarded and vulnerable with Fern as he had been with her. She had to lay out the plain, unvarnished truth of her circumstances, her lack of standing, her meagre savings, the reality of who she truly was. That was the only way there could be absolutely no misunderstandings between them. She was on her feet at once, settling at her desk as her heart beat out a new frantic rhythm. Carefully nudging aside her clutter, a clinking cluster of empty glass vials waiting to be filled, an errant teacup with dried dregs she desperately needed to return to the kitchen downstairs, and the heavy bulk of her mortar and pestle. She cleared a space so she could smooth out a fresh sheet of parchment. Grabbing her quill and her ink, she let her wildly swirling thoughts spill directly onto the page. Dear Fern, I am writing this by the light of my oil lamp just before dawn, and I must confess that I am still half convinced I am caught up in a dream. Are you truly a real man, or simply a wondrous figment of my imagination? Because the truth of the matter is this. If you are real, then I fear I am unworthy of your admiration or your attention. You flatter me greatly. You spoil me with your baked gifts. And I will admit that I want to bask in it all, your admiration, your flattery, your attention. And yet I find myself only able to ask, why? Why me? Why would you spend any time at all tracking the moments until you hear from me again? I am a woman of few accomplishments and very little means. I possess no property, no dowry, and no great standing in Luminara society. I am an orphan with no relatives to speak of. I can offer you nothing beyond mere words. So I suppose that is exactly what I will do now. The pastry you baked is an absolute marvel. I could easily eat them every day, though I fear I would surely make myself sick doing so. You are quite a talented baker. Is that your profession? Thank you for sharing that beautiful verse with me this morning. The fact that you are clearly a man of God both warms my heart and leaves me feeling some guilt toward my own study of the Word. When I was younger, I endeavored to read my Bible every day. I know I still should, but I will confess that I often get so caught up in life that I sometimes forget to do so. God should always be foremost in our hearts, our souls, our minds. But when life becomes heavy with worries and doubts, why is it always our relationship with Him that is first to fall to the wayside? You say you long to know my thoughts, Mr. Fern, and I must say that I have many, though I would be thoroughly embarrassed to share half of them with you just yet. But I will gladly share this. I am so very grateful for this correspondence, for the gentle effort made toward me to make me feel seen, for the time and care poured into each of your letters. Thank you, truly. Even if you should never write to me again now that I have warned you of my terribly low standing, I want you to know how delightful this has all been, and how much I have appreciated coming to know you even in this small way. Yours truly, Ivy Fairwood. Chapter 18. The rest of the morning passed in a pleasant, familiar blur of routine, the peace that had settled in her heart in the wake of her prayers accompanying her all the while. Over a breakfast of finishing off Fern's delectable chocolate pastry and sipping Earl Grey tea at the Honeybloom, Ivy recounted the details of Grandma Evelyn's dinner to a thoroughly delighted Daphne. The fawn spent half the meal gasping in shock and the other half giggling at her audacious debate with Mr. Vale. Following breakfast, it was time to check on Abigail once more. Ivy took a leisurely stroll down the cobblestone street, accompanied by Sir Charles. The dignified brown tabby kept perfect pace at her side, his tail swishing a lazy rhythm as they made their way to the Whitfields' tailor shop. There, she was pleased to find her patient sitting up in bed, looking a good deal brighter and her breathing sounding far less rattled. Obediently, Abigail swallowed another spoonful of the dark amber syrup before tucking herself back in for more rest, leaving the Whitfields eager to ply Ivy and Sir Charles with yet more tea and the Fable Cat's favourite mid-morning snack, sardines on toast. By the time they stepped back outside, the early part of the day had quite slipped away from her, bleeding into the hazy warmth of nearly lunchtime. Taking a seat in one of the wooden rocking chairs situated on the tailor shop's wide front porch, Ivy let out a contented sigh. She tipped her head back, closing her eyes to bask in the warm, fragrant spring breeze, while Sir Charles hopped up onto the wooden railing beside her to sunbathe properly. The steady creak-creak of the rocking chair against the porch soon lulled her into a pleasant stupor. Idly she opened her eyes and let her gaze drift across the street toward the corner shop. Vale's Vellum. For a business claiming to be hosting its grand opening that very afternoon, the place looked remarkably deserted. The front door remained firmly shut. The curtains were drawn tight against the sun. In fact, there had been absolutely no sign of Mr. Vale's silhouette slipping in or out all morning. Curious, very curious indeed. Ivy frowned, her rocking slowly coming to a halt. What could he possibly be doing in there? Preparing his stock? Or perhaps he was waiting on a delivery of... A cold spike of dread suddenly pierced her chest. The delivery. The plants for the Halloway order. The very plants Mr. Vale needed to mix the specific shade of purple for Daphne's wedding invitations. She had intended to be out in the woods foraging for them hours ago. "Oh, goodness!" Ivy gasped, leaping to her feet with such force that the rocking chair pitched backward and slammed against the shop's facade. On the railing, Sir Charles let out a startled yowl. Claws scrabbling wildly against the wood, he nearly tumbled backward into the Whitfields' flower beds.
"I say, Miss Ivy,"
the Fable Cat huffed. He quickly righted himself, settling back onto his haunches.
"Is all well?"
"Of course, Sir Charles, do forgive me," Ivy hastily apologised. "I just remembered I should have set out to work ages ago."
"Would you care for some company?"
he called after her, even as she launched herself down the porch steps. "Oh, I would not wish to trouble you," she called back over her shoulder. Her awful boots clapped loudly against the cobblestones as she broke into a hurried jog. She needed to get back to the apartment, fetch her pruning shears and her herb basket, and disappear straight into the forest before Mr. Vale realised she had forgotten his order entirely. The man no doubt already thought she was a nuisance, putting uncivilised thoughts into his daughter's head about attending country balls before being out in Veritas society and skipping school to go frolic in the forest. She absolutely refused to give him a reason to think she was incompetent at her trade as well. Breathless, she skidded to a halt outside the bake shop's front door, nearly colliding with Felix on his way out.
"Miss Ivy?"
The postmaster greeted, stepping aside with a cheerful grin. He looked incredibly smart in his brass-buttoned uniform, a heavy leather satchel slung across his chest.
"Just the woman I was trying to find. I have a letter for you."
For a moment, Ivy's heart completely forgot how to beat. A letter. Her panic over forgetting her work instantly fled as Felix reached into his leather satchel and withdrew an envelope sealed with a dollop of red wax bearing the image of a fern leaf. Fern had written her back already. She reached out for it with trembling fingers, taking the letter as if it might evaporate like mist beneath the rising sun.
"And no,"
Felix added with a sigh, raising a hand to stop the question before it could even form on her parted lips.
"I didn't see the fellow who left it for me to deliver."
Ivy's boots pinched her toes dreadfully with every step she took, but as she made her way down the lane leading out of Gracehaven, she hardly felt the ache. For once, she was practically walking on air. The herb basket draped over her forearm bumped a gentle rhythm against her hip, her iron pruning shears rattling softly inside. Beneath her feet, the neat town cobblestones finally gave way to the dusty dirt track that wound toward the forest, the magical creature sanctuary, and the neighbouring town of Vale far beyond. Somewhere in the distance, the bright, bell-like whinny of a Pegasus rang out, drifting beautifully on the warm spring breeze. It was a perfectly lovely day, made infinitely brighter by Fern's latest letter clutched carefully in her free hand. She had broken the red wax seal the moment she was out of Felix's sight. Now, her eyes hungrily devoured the looping masculine script as she walked.
"Dear Miss Ivy, I must beg your patience with me today, as I write this letter in haste, though I promise to write you a much more eloquent letter this evening. I desire nothing more than to give you every ounce of my attention that you might be willing to accept. But alas, I have a rather busy day ahead of me. However, I could not step out my door without first writing a note to banish this terrible thought from your mind at once. This notion of you being somehow unworthy of my admiration because you lack material wealth is completely ridiculous. I do not care in the slightest that you consider yourself a woman of little standing and no means. My interest lies completely in your heart, your mind, and your soul, not in anything so fleeting and trivial as worldly possessions and titles. Please do not ever doubt your worth. Not to me, not to anyone. But to answer your question of why, I can only say this. I wish I knew. I pray you do not misunderstand my words and take offense. I mean no offense toward you, but only toward me. Long ago, I made a promise to myself that I would never again be troubled with matters such as these. Matters of gentle affection and admiration. Matters in which I might allow an intriguing woman such as yourself to draw close enough to wound me deeply if she so wished. I have been wounded in such a way before, and one would think I would have learned my lesson the first time. But then I met you. And here we are. You fascinate me. Though I am a fool for saying such, merely thinking of you is enough to make my pulse quicken. But I hope you do not think me some great, holy man simply because I quote scripture to you. I am a sinner, just as we all are sinners. I stumble, just as we all stumble. Some days I am not as devoted to my studies as I should be. But to wake up and decide to serve the Lord is a decision we must make each and every day, is it not? There is no need for you to write back to me just yet, though I would certainly never scorn a letter from you should you choose to send one. I promise to write further at my earliest convenience. And I am real, though I am flattered that you think me a dream. God grant me the courage to speak to you in person, so that I may prove how real I am, though still I fear you will prefer this version of me, the eloquent me on paper, to the me I present in the flesh. But I must go. Until my next letter, I remain your admirer, Fern. P.S. I am not a professional baker, but you flatter me again by questioning if I am.
Ivy exhaled a shaky sigh as she drifted out of the bright afternoon sun and stepped beneath the cool, welcoming canopy of the forest's edge. The ancient woods greeted her with their usual quiet enchantment. Luminescent motes of silver and gold drifted lazily through the dappled shade, suspended in the cool air like glowing pollen, while the patches of emerald moss carpeting the roots underfoot seemed to hum with a faint, soft light of their own. Pausing, she pressed her back against the rough bark of a towering oak tree. Its branches rustled in the breeze as if in greeting while she cradled Fern's letter against her chest, right over her racing heart. He was real. He was truly real, and he didn't care at all that she was a woman of no means. He was just interested in her. And he was just as confused by the suddenness of all of this as she was. Strangely, that was a comfort to her. At least if she was being swept away by something wild and new, something wonderful and surprising all at once, she wasn't being swept away all on her own. Oh, if only she didn't have to work today, she could soak her aching soles in the chill waters of the stream while she wrote him back at once, pouring her heart out onto the page, encouraging him to seek her out in person, to make himself known. But then I met you. Her heart skipped another beat, rereading that line. He knew her already. He must be someone here in Gracehaven. But who? Suddenly that telltale prickle of eyes upon her sent the hairs on the back of her neck to rising. Ivy stiffened, her musings about Fern vanishing in an instant. Someone was out here in the woods with her. Shoving his letter deep into the pocket of her dress, she whipped her head to the side just in time to see a dark figure striding purposefully toward her from amongst the trees. A figure none other than Caelen Vael. Ivy's jaw dropped. By all rights, the elven man should have looked utterly, completely absurd, dressed as he was like a gentleman stepping out for a leisurely afternoon stroll along the paved, manicured promenades of Veritas. Today, he wore a sharply tailored coat of midnight blue silk over a pristine dove-grey waistcoat. But he didn't look ridiculous in the slightest. He looked exactly like an ancient elf lord stepping straight out of a forgotten myth. Though he moved through a wild, untamed wood, he remained impossibly untouched by it. Not a single speck of dirt clung to his mirror-polished boots. Brambles and thorny vines seemed to instinctively recoil from his path, pulling back their jagged teeth rather than daring to snag against his fine breeches. And yet, for all his otherworldly airs, he still possessed all the mundane trappings of a gentleman. Tucked neatly beneath one arm was a tightly folded black silk parasol, while his other hand held open a gold pocket watch. Like that, he closed the distance between them, his hard blue eyes snapping up from the face of his watch to pin her in place once more, right there against the trunk of that ancient oak tree.
Miss Fairwood,
Mr. Vale bit out, a hint of annoyance edging his tone.
do you have any idea what time it is?